Did you start Blender recently? Are all of your creations low poly monsters like this? Do you want to start creating better things with more details? If so, then this is the right video for you. The abominations you just saw are what I was making just a few days ago, and this is what I'm making now. Okay, I'll admit it, they're still far from perfect, but it is still a huge improvement for only a day or so. Let's see the two simple tricks I used. First, let's create a rug the way I used to, and probably the way you are still doing it. First I create a square and then I subdivide it a little bit to get more vertices. Then you move each individual face, or maybe use the proportional editing tool to smooth things out. Then you apply a material to it to change the color. And that is pretty simple and gives you an acceptable result for a beginner, but now it's time to level it up. The first simple trick is to use sculpting. Sculpting is probably the most powerful tool in Blender for most things that you want to create. It is extremely versatile, it can be used to make rocks, characters, and pretty much anything. If we go into sculpting right now and try to move things around and add details, you can see it doesn't let us do much details. And that's because the sculpt tool is limited by the amount of vertices. You could subdivide your whole rock even more and get more vertices all over the rock and draw smaller details using them, but it would create a mesh with a lot of vertices, and most of them would be unused on a flat surface. You can see to create even a small amount of details, I had to subdivide my rock until it had 200,000 triangles, and most of them were useless. This is not optimized at all and will get very laggy very fast, especially if you put these mesh in a game. Imagine a game where every rock is 200,000 triangles, it would be extremely laggy. Instead, what you need to do is check at the top right of the sculpting menu a tool called Dyntopo, or use the shortcut Ctrl-D. This will allow the sculpt to create new topology as you sculpt and create areas with more or less details without adding useless vertices all over. If you use the relative detail, the more zoomed in you are, the higher the detail is. If you use constant, it's always the same, and for brush detail, it's based on the size of the brush and the zoom. Using this, you can create small details on your mesh, and as you can see, it only creates a lot of vertices in the areas that you need, instead of all over the rock, so the total is much lower. This way, we can create lines with more details than our previous examples, and using only 61,000 triangles instead of 200,000. Not only is this good for optimizing, but it also makes it a lot easier to sculpt. Without Dyntopo, if I try to pull a part of the mesh using the snake hook, it won't let me pull it far because it will run out of vertices, and it will also stretch the faces. But with Dyntopo, I can pull and move things however I want, and the mesh will adapt and the faces will stay relatively the same size. Sculpting with Dyntopo allows for more intuitive creation of the shapes you want, and allows you to create varying details, to not use too many vertices while still having detail. Discovering that was a life changer for me. You can see using only 20,000 triangles I was able to make a pretty nice rock with some nice detail. I will soon upload another video on how to reduce vertices and optimize meshes for game dev while keeping details, so check it out if you're interested. Another good thing with sculpting is that you can use brushes. I downloaded a pack online and I will link it in the description if you want it. Using those brushes I can easily create smooth cracks and claw marks. Dyntopo automatically creates the vertices needed for them, so that's great. The second trick is to use a texture. You can see my rock is all one color, and this is very boring. If you go into edit mode, select the whole mesh using A, right click, and click Smart UV Project. Then you just need to increase the island margin a little bit so it doesn't overlap. And then you click OK, it will generate a UV for your mesh. Then you can go into the Texture Paint tab, create a new texture, give it a name, choose a base color, choose a higher resolution if you want, and then create it. Now you can see I can choose a color and paint on the rock, and it will draw it on the texture. You can pick a color on the mesh or texture using the S key, so if I grab the rock color, go a bit lighter, and then draw on the top, it already makes the rock look a lot better. But once again, you can use brushes to make it look even better. I will put a link in the description for them too. Using brushes, you can create patterns on your texture easily, such as textile, wood, cut, etc. I'll use a natural sort of noise texture with a lighter color and draw randomly over the rock to create some color variation. Then I can use the cut brush with a light color to put some claw marks on the texture. And you can see just like that the rock looks a lot more natural and the claw marks make it more interesting. This doesn't add any vertices and has little to no effect on the render time compared to a flat color. So make sure you use textures. To recap, just by sculpting with Dyntopo, you should be able to make the shapes you want a lot more easily and create details without adding hundreds of thousands of vertices. Using the textures on top of that, you can make the models look more interesting with rust, cuts, leather patterns, etc. I hope you enjoyed and that this is going to help you make better models. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe.